This afternoon, a woman and her boyfriend have pleaded guilty in the death of a toddler she was babysitting. Jeffrey Myers and Kirstie Flood both have pleaded guilty to murder and other charges in the death of 2-year-old Fallon Fridley, who died in 2020. Now, Fridley was found unresponsive in Flood's apartment off Monterey Parkway. An autopsy showed she had several injuries that led to her death. Flood was sentenced to life without parole.
Let's see here. Her belly is full of blood. She's got an injury to her liver, her spleen, and her colon, and is still actively bleeding inside. She has no brain function.
Oh my God, stop.
She's got bruises all over her body.
Stop.
She's got bruises all over her head. The external part of her head is swollen.
Come on, man. Don't do this to me. Don't ruin my life.
Greetings and welcome back. I am the Archivist, and tonight we open a file that explores the darkest corners of human nature. A place where trust is not just broken, but utterly annihilated. The story we're exploring today is a chilling reminder that the most terrifying monsters are not those that lurk in the shadows, but often the ones we invite into our homes, the ones we trust with our most precious treasures. This is a story about a mother's love, a child's stolen future, and a friendship that masked an unthinkable evil. It begins in the quiet, affluent suburbs of Sandy Springs, Georgia, a place where families feel safe. But in December of 2020, that sense of security was about to be shattered by a 911 call and an autopsy report that would reveal a babysitter's horrifying secret. Our story begins with Fridley-Gantt, a devoted mother living and working in the Atlanta area. Her world revolved around her 2-year-old daughter, a little girl named Fallon Fridley. By all accounts, Fallon was a vibrant, joyful toddler. She was the center of her mother's universe, a bright light with an infectious smile and a curious spirit. Like any working parent, Kristen needed reliable childcare, someone she could depend on to care for Fallon with the same love and attention she would. For Kristen, the choice was obvious. It wasn't a stranger from an agency or a daycare with a long waiting list. It was her best friend. Her name was Kirstie Flood. At 29 years old, Kirstie was more than just a friend to Kristen. She was practically family. Their bond had been forged over 5 years, a deep and trusting friendship that made them feel more like sisters. Kirstie had her own children, and she understood the challenges and joys of motherhood. When Kristen needed someone to watch Fallon full-time, Kirstie seemed like the perfect solution. She had been watching Fallon on and off for a while, but in August of 2020, she officially became Fallon's full-time babysitter. The arrangement was built on a foundation of absolute trust. This wasn't just a caregiver. This was Aunt Kirstie. Every morning, Kristen would drop Fallon off at Kirstie's apartment on Monterey Parkway in Sandy Springs, confident that her daughter was in the safest hands possible. For months, this routine was a picture of normalcy and friendship. There were no warning signs, no red flags, nothing to suggest the unimaginable horror that was unfolding behind closed doors. Kristen saw only the smiling face of her best friend, a woman she had known and trusted for years, a woman who was supposed to love Fallon as her own. What no one knew was that beneath the surface of this trusted friendship, a deep and disturbing darkness was festering. And soon, that darkness would consume the innocent life of a 2-year-old girl. The date was December 9th, 2020. It began like any other Wednesday. Kristen dropped Fallon off at Kirstie's apartment, likely with a quick hug, a loving goodbye, and the promise to be back later. The day passed uneventfully, or so it seemed. But as evening fell across Sandy Springs, a frantic 911 call shattered the quiet. The call came from Kirstie Flood's apartment. A child was unresponsive. Paramedics and police rushed to the scene, their sirens cutting through the night. They found little Fallon Fridley unconscious. Every effort was made to save her as she was rushed to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. At the hospital, a frantic and heartbroken Kristen met with Kirstie, desperate for answers. What had happened to her baby girl? Kirstie Flood, seemingly distraught, had a story ready. It was a simple, tragic accident. She told Kristen, and later the police, that she had taken Fallon to a nearby park earlier that day. While playing, Fallon had hit her head on a piece of playground equipment, a slide. Kirstie claimed that after the fall, Fallon seemed a little out of it, so she put her down for a nap. But when she went to wake her up later, Fallon was completely unresponsive. She said that she and her boyfriend, Jeffrey Myers, who was also at the apartment, tried to wake the little girl, even putting her in a cold bath. before they finally called 911. To a grieving mother, the story was devastating, but it made a terrible kind of sense. Children are clumsy. They fall, accidents happen. It was a plausible explanation for a nightmare scenario. But as doctors fought to save Fallon's life, their initial observations began to raise questions. The severity of the child's condition seemed extreme for a simple bump on the head from a playground slide. Tragically, despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Fallon Fridley's injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead on December 10, 2020. Kristen's world collapsed into a black hole of grief. Her bright, beautiful daughter was gone. As her family reeled from the loss, the police investigation began to move forward. They had Kirstie Flood's statement, the account of a tragic accident. But in any case involving the death of a child, investigators must be thorough. They must rule out any other possibility. The next step in their procedure was a standard one, but it would be the one that turned this case from a tragic accident into a chilling homicide investigation. That step was the autopsy, and what the medical examiner found would not only expose Kirstie's story as a lie, it would reveal a truth more monstrous than anyone could have imagined. The Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office conducted a thorough examination of 2-year-old Fallon Fridley. The findings were immediate and horrifying. The story of a fall from a playground slide was not just inconsistent with the evidence, it was an absolute impossibility. The autopsy revealed that Fallon had suffered a massive, catastrophic skull fracture. Her internal injuries were just as devastating. The report detailed severe lacerations to her liver, spleen, and colon. These were not the injuries of a simple playground tumble. They were the kind of injuries medical examiners typically see in victims of high-speed car crashes or falls from multi-story buildings. They were the result of immense, focused, and violent blunt force trauma. This was no accident. The medical examiner ruled Fallon Fridley's death a homicide, and the horror did not end there. The autopsy uncovered another layer of depravity. The report concluded that the little girl had also been subjected to aggravated sexual battery. The foundation of trust Fridley-Gantt had placed in her best friend crumbled into dust. The narrative of a tragic accident was replaced by the terrifying reality of a brutal, intentional, and fatal assault. The investigation, which had begun as a standard death inquiry, now pivoted into a full-blown murder case. And the prime suspect was the person last seen with Fallon. The person who had concocted the story of the playground fall, Kirstie Hannah Flood. With the autopsy results in hand, detectives from the Sandy Springs Police Department turned their full attention to Kirstie. The woman Kristen had known as a loving friend and dedicated babysitter was now the central figure in her daughter's murder investigation. Investigators began to dig into Kirstie's past, looking for anything that might shed light on the darkness she had hidden so well. What they found was a history that stood in stark contrast to the image of a responsible mother and caregiver. Before the age of 21, Kirstie Flood had already been arrested 5 times. Her prior charges included battery, alcohol use, and drug possession. In 2012, she was arrested for possessing a prescription anti-anxiety medication without a valid prescription and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. She later violated that probation and served 15 days in jail. Even more recently, in the months leading up to Fallon's death, the very months she was her full-time babysitter, police had filed 6 separate incident reports involving Kirstie for issues ranging from larceny to harassing communications. This wasn't just a person with a troubled past. This was a person with a pattern of unstable and criminal behavior. These were red flags that had gone unnoticed, hidden behind the facade of a 5-year friendship. The evidence was mounting, but detectives needed more. They needed to understand what was going on in Kirstie Flood's mind in the days and hours before she murdered a helpless child. The key, they believed, might be locked inside her cell phone. They obtained a search warrant, and what they found on that device was the final, chilling piece of the puzzle. It was a digital window into a deeply disturbed psyche. Combing through her internet search history, investigators uncovered queries that were both bizarre and terrifyingly specific. She had been searching for things like, what type of people enjoy abusing other people's children? And what does it mean to have a sudden urge to beat a child that's not yours? These were not the searches of a concerned caregiver. They were the explorations of a predator. The searches proved that the violence inflicted on Fallon was not a spontaneous act of rage. It was something Kirstie had been contemplating, researching, and perhaps even fantasizing about. The digital footprints she left behind painted a portrait of a woman wrestling with, or perhaps indulging in, monstrous urges directed at the very child she was entrusted to protect. The trusted friend, Aunt Kirstie, was a mask. The real Kirstie Flood was a person capable of searching for the meaning behind a desire to harm a child, and then tragically, acting on it. Armed with the damning autopsy report and the chilling evidence from her phone, police knew they had their killer. The pieces fit together into a narrative of unspeakable betrayal. Kirstie Flood had not just failed to protect Fallon. She had become the monster the little girl needed protection from. But there was still one more person in that apartment on that fateful day. Kirstie's boyfriend, Jeffrey Scott Myers. Investigators needed to understand what role, if any, he played in the final, terrifying hours of Fallon Fridley's life. The presence of Jeffrey Myers in the apartment added another layer of complexity to the investigation. He was there when Fallon was suffering. He was there when Kirstie was concocting her story about the playground. He was there when they placed her in a cold bath instead of immediately calling for help. What did he see? And more importantly, what did he do? Initially, his role was unclear, but as detectives dug deeper, they began to suspect he was more than just a passive bystander. While Kirstie Flood was the one who inflicted the fatal injuries, the investigation concluded that Jeffrey Myers was criminally negligent. They determined that the severe abuse occurred within a relatively short time frame when he was present in the home. He was aware of the abuse. He saw the child's deteriorating condition, yet he did nothing to intervene. He didn't step in to stop Kirstie. He didn't pick up the phone and call 911 to get Fallon the urgent medical help she so desperately needed. In the eyes of the law, his inaction made him complicit. By failing to act, by failing to protect a helpless child from the monster in the room, he had contributed to her death. On December 11, 2020, just 2 days after Fallon was rushed to the hospital, Kirstie Flood was arrested. The initial charges were read: malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, and cruelty to children. The mask was officially off. The trusted friend was now a murder suspect, her face plastered across local news outlets. The community of Sandy Springs was left reeling from the shock. Less than a month later, on January 6, 2021, Jeffrey Scott Myers was also taken into custody. He was charged with second-degree murder and second-degree cruelty to children. His arrest, underscoring the legal and moral responsibility of a witness to protect a child from harm. With both suspects in custody, the long and arduous journey toward justice for Fallon Fridley began. For her mother, Kristen, the arrests were just the first step. The pain was still raw, the sense of betrayal profound. She had not only lost her daughter, she had lost her best friend, a person she had loved and trusted, in the most violent and horrifying way imaginable. She later told a reporter in a statement that captured the depth of her shock, "It's like this evil was in front of my face for years and I never saw it." Now, she and her family would have to wait for the wheels of the justice system to turn, hoping for a resolution that would honor the memory of their little girl. The legal process, as it often does, moved slowly. For over 3 years, Fallon's family waited for their day in court. They braced for the possibility of a long, painful trial, one that would force them to relive every horrific detail of Fallon's final hours. They would have to listen to medical testimony, see evidence photos, and face the 2 people responsible for their immeasurable loss. But in March of 2024, the case took an unexpected turn, sparing the family the trauma of a full trial. On March 18, 2024, both Kirstie Flood and Jeffrey Myers appeared in a Fulton County courtroom. Instead of proceeding to trial, they both chose to accept plea deals. Kirstie Flood, facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence, pleaded guilty to a litany of charges: malice murder, felony murder, aggravated sexual battery, first-degree cruelty to children, second-degree cruelty to children, making false statements and tampering with evidence. By pleading guilty to malice murder, she admitted that she had intentionally and without provocation killed Fallon Fridley. There was no room for excuses, no claim of an accident. It was an admission of pure, calculated evil. The judge handed down the maximum possible sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kirstie Flood would spend the rest of her natural life behind bars, never again to be a threat to another child. On the same day, Jeffrey Myers also entered a guilty plea. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder, acknowledging his role in failing to protect Fallon and seek medical care, an act of negligence that ultimately contributed to her death. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. For Fallon's family, the sentences brought a sense of closure, a finality to a years-long nightmare. Justice, in the legal sense, had been served. Following the sentencing, Fridley-Gantt took to a Facebook page she had created: "Justice for Fallon." to share her feelings with the thousands of people who had followed her story and offered their support. She posted a photo of her beautiful daughter, a smiling, happy memory frozen in time. The verdict, she said, brought a measure of peace. While nothing could ever bring Fallon back, the knowledge that the people responsible for her death were held accountable meant that her daughter's story had not been in vain. The evil that had been hidden in plain sight for so long was finally brought into the light and locked away. The case of Fallon Fridley sent shockwaves far beyond the quiet streets of Sandy Springs. It became a national story, a chilling cautionary tale that resonated with parents everywhere. News outlets across the country picked up the story, focusing on the ultimate betrayal of trust. The idea that a best friend, a fellow mother, could be capable of such brutality was a concept that was difficult for many to comprehend. The media coverage highlighted the disturbing details of the case, the fatal injuries, the sickening internet searches, and the cold-blooded cover-up attempt. It served as a stark and terrifying reminder that danger doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it comes from the people we know and love best. In the immediate aftermath of Fallon's death, the local community rallied around her family. A GoFundMe campaign was started to help Kristen with the unexpected medical bills and funeral expenses. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from friends, neighbors, and complete strangers who were moved by the tragedy. The campaign raised over $50,000, a testament to the community's collective heartbreak and desire to support a mother enduring the unthinkable. This outpouring of support provided a small beacon of light in an otherwise all-consuming darkness, showing that for every act of unimaginable evil, there exists an immense capacity for human compassion. The long-term impact of Fallon's story is still being written. For her mother, Kristen, the journey of healing is a lifelong one. She has spoken of her desire to honor her daughter's memory by helping others, to be a light to others who have faced similar devastating losses. She has mentioned plans to write a book, to share her story not just as a tale of tragedy, but as one of survival and a mother's undying love. Through her advocacy, she hopes to ensure that Fallon's name is never forgotten, and that her story might serve to protect other children from a similar fate. While there is no direct legislative act named for Fallon Fridley, her case has become part of a broader, ongoing conversation about childcare safety in Georgia and across the nation. The tragedy highlights critical gaps in how society vets and trusts informal caregivers. When childcare is arranged based on friendship and personal relationships, the formal background checks and safety protocols of a licensed facility are often bypassed. Fallon's death forces a difficult and uncomfortable question. How can you ever truly know what someone is capable of behind closed doors? In the years following this case, there has been a growing push for stronger childcare regulations in Georgia. For instance, new guidelines set to take effect in 2025 from the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning will require new childcare employees to become certified in CPR and first aid within 45 days of being hired, cutting the previous 90-day window in half. Additionally, proposed legislation like House Bill 269, introduced in early 2025, aims to mandate that all licensed childcare facilities carry liability insurance. While these measures apply to formal daycare settings, they reflect an increased awareness and a societal demand for greater accountability and safety for children. Tragedies like Fallon's fuel the urgency behind such reforms, reminding lawmakers and the public of the devastating consequences when safety measures fail. The legacy of Fallon Fridley is a dual one. It is a story of profound personal tragedy, of a life cut short, and a family shattered by an act of incomprehensible violence. But it is also a powerful public warning. It compels us to look closer, to ask harder questions, and to never take trust for granted, especially when it comes to the safety of a child. It's a story that challenges our most basic assumptions about friendship, and exposes the terrifying reality that evil can wear the most familiar and disarming of faces. Fallon's bright smile, immortalized in photos, now stands as a silent, heartbreaking testament to the innocence that was lost, and a permanent reminder of the vigilance required to protect it. So what do we take away from the archives today? The story of Fallon Fridley is not just a true crime case. It is a profound human tragedy about the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth: that the people we believe we know best can harbor secrets we could never imagine. Kirstie Flood was not a monster who appeared out of nowhere. She was a friend, a mother, a part of a community. She built a relationship over 5 years, earning the trust that would eventually give her the opportunity to commit an unspeakable act. Her story is a chilling illustration of how darkness can hide in plain sight, masked by the mundane routines of everyday life. This case serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of listening to our intuition and of the hidden histories people carry with them. While no one could have predicted the horrific outcome, the red flags in Kirstie Flood's past were there. It is a heartbreaking lesson that friendship, on its own, is not a substitute for due diligence when the safety of a child is at stake. Ultimately, Fallon's story is one of a profound and senseless loss. But in her mother's strength, in the community's support, and in the ongoing fight for better child protection, her memory endures. It is a legacy of love that refuses to be extinguished by an act of hate. Thank you for joining me in the archives tonight. The stories we examine here are often dark, but it is by studying them that we can hope to find light, understanding, and perhaps a way to prevent such tragedies from happening again. If you found this exploration meaningful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories from the archives. Until next time, stay vigilant and stay safe.